If your dog cries at the sound of whistling coming from the basement, don't go down there. Jesse is a good boy. When he was a pup, my wife and I were flabbergasted at his mild disposition. Uncle Dan, who gifted the dog from his litter of German shepherds, proudly proclaimed the puppy was a sturdy sort. To me, however, Jesse always looked frightened beneath the surface. His steely resolve didn't fool me. If he hadn't been a newborn puppy, I would have worried that he had suffered abuse from previous owners. As it would transpire, Jesse was enduring a very different kind of trauma. "What's the racket, boy?" That was a question I asked yesterday morning at 3 o'clock. Susie had nudged me awake to see why Jesse was crying downstairs. My shivering German shepherd was standing in front of the door to the basement, but that wasn't even the darndest thing. Jesse was pointing his paw at the door. "You don't want to go down there, boy," I said. "Are you after a midnight snack? Come on, you're smart. You know where I keep them." A shrill ringing noise erupted from the basement. It sounded like a man's dissonant whistling, at first a sinister song, but it eventually settled on one excruciating, continuous note. Jesse whimpered, and the noise gradually quietened. Then I realized it had simply ascended to a pitch that I couldn't hear. But the dog clearly heard something. His paw fell to the floor, and he fidgeted from side to side, whining painfully. "Okay, not sure what's making that sound," I gulped. "Give me a second to fetch the flashlight, Jesse. The basement light doesn't work, and I wasn't going to stumble around in the dark." As I was rummaging through kitchen drawers for the torch, I heard the basement door open of its own accord. There was no way the dog had opened it, of course. "Jesse," I called. Finally holding the flashlight in my hand, I darted into the hallway and stared down the blackened staircase into the basement. I could hear Jesse's paws softly plodding against the ground, but his sobbing had ceased. Mustering every ounce of courage, I shone the torchlight down the stairs, illuminating the sinisterly still basement. Every wooden step moaned beneath my weight, threatening to give way, but the rotting stairs held. I finally found myself in the cluttered, chaotic basement area. "Jesse," I called. A weak woof sounded from the far corner of the room, so I weaved between boxes and shelves to uncover what had enthralled Jesse. As I would soon learn, fear had motivated him, not eager curiosity. Rounding the mound of basement clutter, I cast my light onto the far side of the room, and there was my dog. He was standing perfectly still, soundlessly staring at something in the corner, something that my eyes did not, or could not, immediately process. A dark, towering shape so large that it had to hunch forwards to fit into the room. Its spindly limbs stretched across the walls and ceiling. At first, I thought it to be an emaciated and obscenely tall man, but then it started to look more like a horrifyingly humongous insect. Finally, I decided it wasn't any earthly thing. All I knew for sure was that it terrified me. Its lips moved, speaking to Jesse at a frequency only he could hear. But the monstrous thing stopped talking when it noticed my flashlight. White, marble, pupil-less eyes sitting in the midst of a darkened face surveyed me. Then its lips opened again, and though I could not hear a sound, my eardrums swelled until I thought they might burst. I screamed in agony, dropping the flashlight to clutch my ears. The basement window smashed, and my torch rolled across the floor, briefly illuminating the insect-like entity as it inexplicably seeped into the brickwork of my house. It slithered between cracks in a way that no living animal could. Jesse howled in terror, and I ran over to him, scooping up my torch on the way. "Come on," I cried. "Upstairs, boy. Now." When we reached the lobby, I slammed the basement door shut and locked it. Susie was racing down the stairs, and she sprinted over to us with a concerned look on her face. "What was all of that noise?" she asked. "It's fine," I lied, shaking uncontrollably. My Jesse gave me a scare. That's all. I didn't sleep that night. I begged Susie to allow Jesse to sleep in our room. I told her that he'd seen a wild animal in the basement and seemed shaken up about it. A half-truth always seems more morally justifiable than an outright lie. Today, I was barely responsive at work. I kept replaying that horrible night in my head. What had I seen? What did it want from my dog? So many unknowns. I truly wish I were telling the truth to Susie. I wish it had just been a rodent. But the way its spidery form had slinked into the wall defied all physical explanation. And yesterday night was only the beginning. During the foggy hours of this evening, I walked home through the local park. Within the white mist that shrouded the path and pedestrians, I caught glimpses of spindly shapes, flitting from tree to tree. Just your imagination, I told myself, trembling in fear. Then I started to notice unnerving behavior from passers-by. To be more precise, their dogs unnerved me. A cocker spaniel whined, giving me a wide berth as it passed. Then a whippet whimpered, hurriedly dragging its owner past me. 3 or 4 other dogs reacted in the same way, casting fearful looks in my direction as they passed. And all the while, I kept briefly catching glimpses of insect limbs in the fog scurrying out of sight before I could fully set my eyes upon them. My breathing became labored as true terror gripped me, and I started to quicken my pace. People cast perplexed looks in my direction, the frenetic man who was frightening their dogs. When I finally reached my street, I wasn't sure whether to feel relieved or terrified. A house is a place that should make a person feel safe. But when I pictured my home, I could only see the basement, the horrendous thing in the basement, and it seemed there was no escaping it in the outside world either. I reassured myself that all I had to do was ignore it, keep the basement door locked, keep Jessie away from it, and all should be well. I repeated that over and over in my mind, too distracted to absorb my surroundings. And with my guard down, that's when it struck. I felt something tugging at the bottom of my jeans. When I looked down, the color drained from my skin. A black limb was coiling around my ankle, planting me to the ground. I screamed, looking around, but the foggy street was deserted. And when my eyes followed the elongated limb, I saw that it led to a pothole in the middle of the road. The pothole that we've long encouraged the council to fix, the pothole that had transformed into a ceaseless void of blackness. I fell to the tarmac, desperately shrieking for help and clawing at the black limb that dragged me across the road. I tried to imagine what lay at the bottom of that pit. Did it even have a bottom? Whatever unholy hovel the demonic creature had created, I knew it would be a place beyond conceivable horror. I closed my eyes, preparing for the unfathomable terror of whatever fate I would meet in that hole. A growl made my eyes shoot open, and I saw Jessie in the road. Thank the Lord for the dog flap that Susie insisted on installing in our back door. Our fearsome shepherd plunged its killer teeth into the entity's black limb, and the demon unleashed a shrill scream of agony, one that I could hear for a brief moment before it reached a frequency beyond human hearing. Jessie whimpered, deafened by the inaudible noise, but his ferocious attack saved my life. The black limb uncoiled itself from my ankle, retreating into its lair. The tarmac closed over the horrifying void, turning it back into an ordinary pothole. I embraced Jessie and cried, rushing out of the fog to the safety of our home. But is it safe? Jessie gave that thing a scare. I'm just worried that it'll be back. What was the insect man saying to my dog in the basement? That unanswered question scares me. It was talking to Jessie. I'm sure of it. Has it always spoken to him? I don't know what it wants from him, from us.